there, folks. I'm Emily.
And I'm Elt.
And I'm so Sherlock. It's like so obvious. And I feel like Elt just doesn't get it, which I feel like makes her a Watson, because if she were Sherlock, she would understand why I'm Sherlock. Ipso facto, quota, therefore ad infinitum, I'm Sherlock.
I told her I'm just so tired of this. I told her she could be Sherlock because I'm done. But just giving in and saying you could be Sherlock was not good enough because she wanted me to understand why she was Sherlock. So that's why we're still on this. Not because I haven't just fine let her be Sherlock at this point. It's because until I repeat it in her words, she's just not going to let up.
As opposed to the following book, which I let up. And thank you very much. I feel like that was a pretty good segue.
That was a pretty decent segue. Okay, credit on that one.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm brushing off my shoulders right now. You guys can't see it, but just know I'm pretty proud of that one. The book we're talking about today is Not Even Bones by Rebecca Schaeffer. It's a YA horror from 2018. And oh my goodness, it was so horrifying to me that I don't think I got more than like 3 chapters in. I couldn't finish it. So Elt is going to take the reins on most of this episode. So I'm just going to give you our ratings and a little bit about the book, and then we'll let her go. And we know that when Elt goes, she can go. So the violence is a 4. The language is a 4. The romance is a 0.5. So it's kind of horrific, but at least there's not romance, which is about as much as I can say for it. The book is about this girl named Nita. Right? I think it's short for Anita, but she goes by Nita?
Yeah, something like that.
Nita doesn't murder supernatural beings and sell their body parts on the internet. Her mother does that. Nita just dissects the bodies after they've been acquired, until her mom brings home a live specimen and Nita decides to save the victim instead of help to cut him up. So the reason I stopped reading it was because I felt like it got a little bit cannibal-y, and I just couldn't. So, Al, what would you like to tell us about this absolutely horrifying novel?
Pun intended. For this, so I did make it through all the way through, and actually, this is the first in a trilogy, and I started reading the second book. I think I was just excited to have read, because I don't read a lot of horror. Oh, and I'll do a plug here. So it's a few bonus episodes ago. It's one of the early bonus episodes that I interviewed Jonathan Jans, who's a horror writer. And we spoke about the difference of some horror being like jump scare horror or, just dark kind of something's coming kind of horror versus horror exploring like the darker side of human nature. So I think I was just, I want to say excited, but I think I was just kind of taken with the idea of reading a horror book that wasn't a jump scare, but just about the darker side of human nature, even though this book is really, really dark. I don't know what dark mind came up with it either, where you have these like supernatural beings. Some of them are expressions that we know, like a unicorn does this, or whatever some of them are, and some of them that she makes up, like it's called a zany or whatever they're called, and they can each do something that's not necessarily natural. But there's also the aspect of like ghouls have to feed on people, or like the zanies or whatever they're called, they feed on people's pain. So like they make very good torture devices because they feed on the pain of other people. So it is very dark. And then there's also people hunt them down because, oh, you're supernatural, like you can't live, and like you're super dangerous supernatural because you have to eat other people. Or you're a less dangerous supernatural because, whatever your power is kind of a harmless one. And then there's also the idea that some of them, like if you grind up, like you could get high on like unicorn bone dust or something. So there's a whole black market, flesh market situation for this. So there is a lot of gross stuff as far as that goes. So that's also part of the horror part of it. We're talking about the dark part of human nature. Because also, like, Nita's thing, which is supposed to be so secret, but she can, like, regenerate. It's not fully regenerate, she can heal herself. So if she gets cut, she'll heal herself. So someone's like, oh, like, he eats her toe because now I'm going to have the healing powers. So first of all, it's absolutely gross. It is so many levels of disgusting. And obviously the guy who does it is disgusting, but the entire setup for it is disgusting. So that's where a lot of that grossness comes from. So if you can't really handle that, which, like, you don't go for cannibalism. That would be...
You know, if you're just one of those weirdos who doesn't like cannibals.
And they also, it's true, the mother-daughter relationship, it's almost like, it is messed up, and it's like a weird kind of codependency, where she lets
it's like the most messed up. I actually like books where there are contentious mother-daughter relationships, because that's very real.
Right.
But this one is, like, beyond messed up.
Yeah, and it's also, like, she wants to stay with the mom instead of staying with the dad, and the parents are still married even though they don't live together or something like that.
And the dad was, like, at least at the beginning of the book, from what I read, she explains the dad as being kind of normal, so I don't understand why she lives with her mom. But I don't think I got far enough in, so maybe there's something I'm missing.
No, she does. And it's like, yeah.
I was just going to say, the mother-daughter relationship being messed up was the least weird thing about this book.
Yeah, ironically. Yeah. And it's also, a lot of stuff was, like, hinted to but never said. Like, the mother just does her thing but doesn't tell her daughter anything. So, like, the daughter doesn't really know. Like, also, to bring in the live specimen, it is, but isn't a hostage sort of thing, because, like, he comes from a very powerful family, but why can't Nita know about that? I don't know. I guess she's not supposed to have information. And then Nita has this thing for dissecting bodies that it brings her calm when she, like, cuts up a body. So it's also pretty dark. So even though she's a protagonist, she's also kind of, no, she's not kind of, she actually is pretty messed up. You see moments where it's like, you see how it comes in if she's fighting someone off and she knows where to cut to, like, incapacitate the person. Right? But it's not like, oh, now I see how, you know, I have a weird thing for dissection. Now I can use it maybe to go, you know, make something happen. She's like, no, she still itches for the scalpel. Like, she doesn't get past that, like, dark part of her. And there's a lot of killing. It's very yucky. Now I'm thinking about it. Why did I read this whole book? Well, yeah, Ellie's just like, she's speechless. She has no idea.
I'm impressed with you, because I know that you will put a book down if it is not something you're enjoying. So I'm proud of you for getting through it. I mean, it's good to try different genres, but don't read this at night. Maybe that was part of my mistake. Like, I read it, I'll just go off to sleep.
Yeah.
Ugh. But I read it in the morning and it wasn't any better.
You know what it is? It might have been morbid fascination, because I don't read horror. I really don't read horror. And it was just like, I was seeing this book and the third book was coming out and people were talking about it. So I was like, I'll give it a try. And one thing I do have to say in their favor, there is not romance. There's the one guy who she kind of teams up with. And that was also like, there are 2 or 3 lines where it's like, and I noticed the way this, that, whatever, that seems to border on the romantic. And it's like, it didn't need to be there. It added nothing. And they don't need to have a romantic relationship. Like, they really don't. Not the way, like, their partnership works. That they're going to get out of this, like, body market and that kind of stuff. The romance really, really, it's not the setting for romance. And it really does not need to be there. And most of it doesn't have it. There's no kissing. There's no anything like that, which, thank God, at least for that. But, it is kind of gross. I think it is kind of gross. It is kind of a gross book.
There were only 2 things, and again, I didn't get very far in, so you'll have to tell me, but there were 2 things because it seems like in a lot of young adult novels that are about creatures or like a fantastical beings, that it's sort of a commentary on race. And I felt like this one also could potentially have been a commentary on sex slavery, because they're being used for their body. So I don't know how much, I got a little bit of the racism because of how they talk about people, and that, I have to admit, also put me off a little bit, because I was like, well, I understand why racism is bad, but I don't know if you're going to convince me that trying to control beings that torture for fun is bad. So I'm not sure I'm so, like, that one doesn't really convince me. But, you know, I could be on board with something that's commenting on sex slavery, but I don't know if that actually
there is definitely
at all.
Yeah. Well, they do have the ones, they also do have the supernaturals, I guess, who are good at that kind of stuff also, or like the prostitute ones or something. But, so I guess that is it also, that I figure it is supposed to be a commentary on race, that, we're going to cast these supernatural beings, they're all evil, and they're all whatever. Even though she does tell us that a lot of them seem to be evil from what she tells us about them. So, it's not, like, I don't know, is it racism to hate a murderer? Like,
right, it's not misplaced hatred to hate bad people.
Yeah, and you're also...
Or creatures.
Or you should hate bad. You should hate evil. You absolutely should.
Right.
You can't just, oh, whatever. Like, no. And if you say, oh, I'm going to separate the person from the evil. So in the second book, In the second book, she does, and probably would have been better if she maybe would have mentioned it in the first, but I guess she wasn't thinking about that way in the first. Maybe she didn't know it was going to be a trilogy or whatever. In the second book, she does mention, like, the people who eat pain, wouldn't they make great doctors because they know exactly where your pain was and they could help you solve it. So now you're taking the narrative and you're trying to flip it. But it's almost like, it's like a book too late almost, if that's what you're trying, if it's trying to go in the race, direction, or like, we shouldn't hate the race of supernaturals. Or like, why is this supernatural worse than this supernatural? You're like, oh, because this supernatural eats other people. You're like, well, this supernatural eats, I don't remember, but like, let's say puppies. Why are they not also evil? It's like, oh, just because it doesn't harm people, so they're not also evil. It's, I don't know, it's like, there's also vampires in there somehow. It's a very interesting, dark world. It actually takes place It takes place in South America, even though supernaturals are everywhere. So it's a different setting. But it is dark. And I guess it's like, it could have hit on certain things and it didn't. Or it could just be because we're not really into the horror stuff.
Yeah.
Because the violence in the language is, the language had the F-bombs and the violence is kind of gross. So.
Yeah, it felt too gruesome personally for a YA novel, because that's still, if YA encompasses 14 to 17, like if this were an adult book, it would still be gross, but you're talking to adults, but too much for young adults. I don't think it's appropriate.
Yeah, especially because, like, the point of it, but maybe, I guess a lot of people don't believe that books have to have a point, or you don't think horror has to have the point, but if you're trying to, again, like, we've cast, the people who eat pain, we've cast them as the villains without seeing the part that they could be the hero. That is something, theoretically, for someone to look at that, oh, I've always hated this person for no reason. Did I never looked at them at a different angle? But that doesn't come in the first book. So it's just, she gets caught, she has to escape sort of thing. Then there's yucky people and evil people, but without, like, the actual point that comes across in the second book. And you can't rely on the second book if that's what the message you're trying to get across.
Right.
So,
recommend, not recommend?
You have to be a very dark person. we have questions for you if you love this book. And not just, because it's different or original, but like, I love the darkness of the people. We have questions for you.
That's fair.
But we probably don't want to ask them to, because why are you in our basement? Stay out of our basement.
No, definitely not letting the people who really like this book, not even letting the author of this book into our basement, because it takes a special kind of brain to come up with stuff like this, and I don't know if I want to meet someone with that kind of brain. Maybe
the joke will be
that's not being very open-minded.
Yeah, she's probably like a really nice person, also. So that's probably a joke.
For sure. Yeah.
Like, how did you think of that story? Yeah.
It's always the quiet ones.
Oh yeah. Bum bum bum.
Anyway, I don't know about you, but I feel like turning on all the lights right now and getting under some very cozy covers and drinking some hot chocolate, because as we learned from Harry Potter, in life, chocolate is the way to deal with any sort of scariness. So I'm going to heat up some hot chocolate and turn on all the lights.
I'll have the hot chocolate, but Emily's not mentioning that she's probably also going to get into a princess dress, because she thinks that when she wears a princess dress, all evil goes away. Even though we know what happens to all princesses at some point, so...
Yeah, but then they live happily ever after.
Right.
So yeah. And I'm very patient.
It will come. It will come.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so there you go. I'm just going to drink the hot chocolate and go back to my room before she tries to give me a tiara or something weird like that.
Great idea. I'll go get one. Thanks for listening.
Cheers, everyone. Oh My Word podcast is brought to you by the pearl-clutching basement dwellers at Oh My Word. Follow us on Instagram for updates at Oh My Word Podcast, or like and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. For full episode notes and detail, visit eltenenbaum.com. Music is by Tim Burke. Sound is by Gabriel Yaffe. See you next time.